Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we are discussing all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our personal and spiritual development journeys. My name is Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a channeler, energy healer, tarot reader, astrologer, and soul alignment coach. My mission in my work and in this podcast is to help teach people how to shift their consciousness, how to heal, and how to release beliefs and patterns and fears of their ego mind so that they can step into alignment with their soul to live lives of abundance, purpose, and bliss. In these episodes, I will be sharing either through my own lens and my own channel or through the experiences of my guest, wisdom and expertise about healing, spirituality, psychology, personal growth, holistic wellness, mysticism, consciousness, and so much more. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen and provide support and inspiration for you with your own personal breakthroughs. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. Today, I have a short little episode where I wanted to tell you about what it honestly looks like for me when I get really deeply triggered. And the reason why I wanted to share this is because I think that there is so much good that comes from seeing examples of how other people move through things in the early parts of our life. Like, we think everybody must process the world and feel things the way that we do and think about things the way we do. And of course, as we get a little older, we're like, wait a minute, people think differently. Like, wait, maybe it's not exactly like this. Maybe this could be different. And then for a lot of us that would be listening to this podcast, then we're trying to actually move towards, okay, what would be a healthier way of experiencing myself in my life and, trying to do all that work. And one of the most helpful things that I've been able to receive, not even necessarily like directly, but through podcasts and stuff, is hearing how people process and move through big moments. And sometimes it gives me ideas and inspirations for something I can do different. But sometimes one of the most important things that it does is just validate that what I'm doing like makes sense and it's not like wrong or something. Because that's one of my things that I am very conscious of and I'm always working through is like jumping to, but am I doing it wrong? Right? Like, am I messing this up somehow? Like, do I got this twisted? Right? So hearing that other people might do it the same way, or that the way that they're doing it, they find to be really healthy. And I'm like, okay, I do it that same way. And I kind of was thinking it was too. Okay, cool. So anyway, all of that to say, I want to share a little bit about what happens for me when I get really, really, really triggered. Like when something happens in my life that makes me really upset. Like really, really upset. And what that looks like for me is somebody who literally their whole job is this like personal and spiritual development and healing and spiritual mindset, but who also is not somebody who like identifies with any of that sort of like spiritual bypassing kind of stuff, who thinks it's so important to be embodied and address your fears and your pains and your shadows while also being guided by your spirit and your love. And I want to sort of like detail exactly what that can look like behind the scenes. Hi, everyone. I'm interrupting this episode for a very important announcement, which is my newest one-to-one coaching program, Soul Powered, is now open for enrollment. Soul Powered is a coaching program with 4 months of intensive one-to-one healing work, but a lifetime of impact. If you have been looking to do one-to-one healing work with me, or if you've been coming to understand and learn and know that your reality is created by your inner worlds, and you are ready to change the trajectory of your whole life by committing to changing that inner landscape, doing healing, and calibrating it towards the dreams that you want for your life, then I invite you to check out my website, healingwithbree.net/soulpower, to read more about this program. In this work together, you will have the opportunity to do a deep dive into your feelings, your beliefs, any past experiences that feel like they're still affecting you negatively in some sort of way. We'll also be working together to identify any limiting beliefs that are creating resistance to your dream life. I'll be showing and teaching you how to be able to get to the root of what your fears and triggers are revealing to you about where you have limiting beliefs, about what you're capable of, what's possible for you, what's safe for you, etc., and how to shift those beliefs to be in line with your true essence, your source energy, and the truth of you so that you can be open and receptive and magnetic to the dream life that is literally waiting to materialize for you. And all the while recalibrating that inner world so that the way that you relate to yourself, your feelings, your experiences can change and come into alignment with your goals and the things that you want to experience. One of the unique things about this program is that I use my energy healing and channeling gifts in the sessions. So, over the 4 months that we work together, we do 90-minute virtual sessions every other week. And in those sessions, I'm plugged into your spirit teams and guides to get their perspective and their suggestions on your healing and transformation work, which, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why my clients have seen such complete and huge transformations in the short time that we work together. Another thing I'm really excited to offer in this program is digital modules that help teach you new concepts, new strategies, and give you new tools to enhance the work that we're doing in our session together. And again, are tools that you can utilize for the rest of your life. Some of the results that I've seen in the clients that I've worked with is having major career and job changes and opportunities come up. I've seen their families grow and health issues subside. I've seen huge changes in relationships, changes in patterns that they were engaged in, didn't understand why this kept coming up, their own part in it. We're able to see that and resolve it. We're able to completely transform relationships for the positive, and we're able to manifest new, authentic relationships. Their ability to understand their fears and their triggers and their blocks more deeply and be able to shift and move through them is going to change their life forever. If these are the kinds of outcomes that would be really meaningful to you, if you've aligned with the kind of work that I do and you're interested in learning more about the program, please check out my website, which has much more details and many more testimonials about what this program can offer you. And let me know if you have any questions. Back to the episode. Okay, so here's the first thing that I'll say is even after my years and years and years of healing work, and of course I'm going to be doing years and years more because that's a constant thing. I'm not trying to get to some destination, but I just would like to let you know that I still get freaking angry. I still get really upset. I still get really indignant. I still get jealous. I still get mad. I still get like all of the things. I still feel all of those feelings. So if there was some part of your brain that told you that, you feeling those things made you bad, or that there's some version of reality that where you like fix yourself enough to where you don't feel those feelings, I'm sorry to tell you that that's not how this works. But feeling those emotions that I described has become so much easier with the work that I've done. The periods of them being here have shortened, and I've been able to find my center and be more grounded, like more quickly after like feeling one of them really intensely. I'm able to find my way back to center and back to peace. And I'm able to find the wisdom and the teachings that they found me like faster and faster all the time when I'm doing this work. So that's how it's different, I would say, than, before I started this work versus now. I still definitely feel them. I probably feel them a little less often, if I'm being honest, especially because I do a lot of work at like reconditioning my own beliefs. So a lot of that stuff just doesn't really get as triggered anymore. Like I've done a lot of work on my self-worth and all that kind of stuff, but I still have stuff, and I'm sure that I always will. Okay. So here is the first thing that I feel like has helped me the most when I get really deeply triggered. And when I say this, I don't mean like somebody cut me off on the road and now I'm feeling a little bit annoyed about it. Like, no, I mean like there's something that is significant and very unfortunate that happens in my life, or that like touches something that's really deeply upsetting to me. Like I'm talking about big triggers. Okay. One of the things that has helped me allow for these moments to happen a little bit better, here's like my collection of things that have helped make that easier. One is that I acknowledge that how I might feel in the moment of being triggered is not who I am. I am not my feelings. I am the observer of feelings, right? And even like the core of who I am, which I would identify as like my spirit isn't changed or isn't impacted or tainted at all by any emotions that come up. They get to be sort of separate. So when I remove the possibility of like my emotions or my feelings meaning something bad about me, it creates so much more space for them to come through. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that looks like and how I do that. The other thing, and you guys hear me talk about this all the time, is I've done so much more work to help regulate my nervous system just like on a baseline. And I am having a digital course come out that teaches you what I think all of the foundations of what you need to know about nervous system dysregulation, identifying what kind of dysregulated state you might be in, and then like teaching you some of the actual tips and methods that you can use to regulate your nervous system. And this is like, even if you only have 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like all of the ways that you can start to learn how to integrate nervous system regulation into your life so that you can create more safety and you can create more space in your body. But that has also helped me moving through triggers a lot easier. One, because my starting starting point is already so much more grounded. It's so much more calm as opposed to like me being at the edge of my limit all of the freaking time, So of course that helps make moments that are legitimately distressing maybe not pop off as much as they would have, And of course, in the moment too, when I feel like my body is ready to calm down, I have those same strategies to help like really deeply and effectively create that peace in my body. Again, I don't use nervous system regulation techniques to try and repress emotions. Like I'm not in the middle of like feeling something really big and trying to regulate myself to make it go away. Personally, I think that's another form of repression and it's probably not going to be very effective. And again, I'll explain like when I'm moving through it, how I let it flow when the wave is still cresting. I like to think of emotions as waves. They build, they crest, and then they fall. Like if it's still having a moment where it needs to come out, I create enough safety to where I'm not like in a full panic attack, but I'm not trying to make the feeling go away, right? It's usually after the wave has like crested and like started to like reside that I would do the nervous system regulation to like really bring my body back into safety. And that's helped make moments where I'm really triggered a lot more manageable. And the last thing that I would say, and I know that I have so much privilege in this, is I've learned how to articulate myself to the people around me in those moments to where I can get a little bit of space because I'm not like totally ready to talk about it, but where I can still get support that I need, right? Because when I get really deeply triggered, like it can take me a few days to come out of it, especially my Pisces moon. It can just take a long time for like things to really be processed with like such a deep feeling moon sign. But even if you don't have that or know anything about astrology, like if you're one of those people where it can just take you a minute, like it's important that the people that you come into contact with, like in your life, like have the ability to know like, okay, this is the thing that has to do with you. And of course, this doesn't mean that you're being nasty and mean or you're making it uncomfortable for them. Like it doesn't mean that it has to be that sort of thing, but where there can be that sort of acknowledgement. And again, I like have the privilege of like me working through those things, having a lot of space in my life. I don't have kids yet. And I know that of course, especially when you have young kids, like your ability to be available to your kids and them always really wanting to be connected with you, of course, can make this a little bit hard. But I really still do feel like even as I tap into my guides about it, that there's a way that you can still be authentic if you're having, a moment where you're not feeling like 100% yourself, where like you can still be present and you don't have to be mean and nasty and weird. But if like somebody asks why you're different, maybe your kids, it's just like, oh, mom is just processing something right now, but she's going to feel really better soon. So like, you don't have to worry about it. Like what? And then, kind of divert the attention. Like, I still feel like there's ways where you can be honest about that to where you can be really present with the trigger, which helps it move faster, by the way, and not have to mask it. And again, have that space and support if you need it. Okay. So let's talk about what this looks like for me. So usually when there's a really big trigger, I feel it a little bit before it happens. Like I feel the remnants of anxious feelings or anxious thoughts, right? Maybe this is something that has popped up once a month ago and then once a couple weeks ago and then a few days ago and then now it's here, right? Like usually these things are not like this is the first time we've ever felt them, So recently I had a certain thing that I knew was a trigger for me and I was actively working through it like myself and with my coach and acknowledging it and like doing my best to like address the fear while still moving towards the thing that I wanted. But the whole idea of this trigger still was something that was anxiety inducing to me. And sure enough, a situation came up where it wasn't really something I could avoid anymore. And the thing that I was afraid of, like, was here, like up until now, it was like, oh, if that thing happens, that would not be ideal to me or that would kind of freak me out. And then it kind of became like, oh, this isn't a future thing anymore. It's kind of like a now thing. And so me facing my fears about that and my anxieties about that was not anything that I could avoid any longer. And basically what happened is I was messaging with my coach about it and she asked, how are you feeling? And I honestly answered that question. And it was probably the first time since, everything, the circumstances had changed a little that I had really voiced that I was struggling with it. And that was what did it. Like that was what opened up the can of worms. Okay. The cat was out of the bag at that point. And it felt like every like emotion that had been underneath all of those fears for so long, like could not be contained. And I feel like the reason why it came up as strong as it did is because I had the tools to be able to like hold the space for those to come out. So I don't want you to be afraid thinking that like every trigger that you have is going to be awful, because I really do believe we're not given things that we can't handle. But part of me doing this healing work and being able to hold space for like really deep, dark emotions in myself means that sometimes when there's a big trigger, I get the deep, dark stuff, you know? So these fears start to come up and I acknowledge it and I just stop what I'm doing and I give it a minute. And usually I talk to myself, which it shouldn't really be a surprise. I mean, that's basically what I do here for this podcast. It's just like talk out into the ether to myself. But that's what I do. And that's something that's really helpful for me. So I'm like in a room by myself and I start talking and I'm like, okay, how do I really feel? And one of my biggest things I say about doing trigger work is let the triggered part of yourself be a part of yourself. So this part of myself that was feeling really anxious and feeling really afraid, that part got to have center stage. I still knew that there was a part of me that knew this wasn't a big deal and knew everything was going to be fine. And that part existed too. But this part that was having a lot of feels needed my TLC. It needed my attention and it needed the space like in my body and in my psyche. So anyway, I'm letting this emotional part come out and man, did they have some emotions. Like there was some anger under this one. Like all of a sudden the things I'm saying is screw this and screw that. And like, it's a full on thing. Okay. And I'm not actually being like violent to anybody. I want to clarify, of course, I'm in my own space and like, I'm not throwing or punching things or whatever. I have healthier ways if I really feel like I need to physically exert anger that does not have to do with breaking anything. So if you need that, don't be ashamed, but just make sure you have some like healthy tools to use. Anyway, I was not at that point, but I was at the point where I was like, screw this and screw that and like angry, like really upset. And I kept letting it come out because again, it felt like the wave was building and building and building. It was the moment to let it out. I didn't want to repress it. And I was like, okay, like what, like, how do I really feel about this? Like, if I'm being really honest, like, how does this part feel? And that part of myself was like ready to throw in the towel about that circumstance. It was ready to just be done. It was fed up. It was angry. And I like was crying. Like I full on was angry, crying and mad at the world. So I let myself have that moment. And sometimes with some triggers, I'll have that moment. And immediately after I let myself speak it and see it and acknowledge it, it starts to recede. That did not happen in this situation. Like I still felt really deeply upset. And basically like this circumstance had changed things for me. So one of the things that I know to do is like to go outside and ground, like putting bare feet on bare earth and like sitting in the sunshine and fresh air. Like it just cannot be underestimated what that can do. And I was like, okay, I'm not trying to make this part of myself feel any different, but I am going to start introducing some things that I know will help me get perspective or help soothe me a little bit and just help like introduce like gentle things that will create the opportunity for me to feel better, but are not me forcing this like emotional experience to go away. So I go outside, I sit on my little chair outside, put my feet on the ground, I cross my arms and I'm still upset. I'm like still crying, like tears, but I'm like, okay, at least I'm outside, right? And my husband comes out, he comes home and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not okay. He just sits there with me. He's so sweet. And he's like, do you want to talk about it? And I kind of say a little bit about it. And thankfully, again, like we've had so many conversations where he knows like it's not a fix it moment. It's just like, let me sense where you're at. So of course he doesn't have to be freaked out that this is like some like catastrophe emergency, like having to do with us. So I tell him a little bit about it, but he just sits there and he's like, well, like, do you want a hug? And I was like, okay, I'll get a hug. And he's like, okay, well, I have to go in and go to therapy. We love a therapy king. And I was like, okay. And so like I sit out there and I cry a little bit more, but then I start to settle a little bit. And that was probably at least 20 minutes after all of this has started, maybe even longer, maybe 30. Okay. And this is for like a very, 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 very deep trigger. Okay. This is not just like a run of the mill everyday sort of thing, even though everyday triggers kind of do have a deep thing. But anyway, I just want to say, not to scare you, because I don't think that this happens all the time, but I want to be so honest about when really deep stuff comes up for me so that you don't feel so crazy when it comes up for you, and like how I lead myself through it in a healthy way or what feels most healthy to me. Okay. So I start to feel a little bit better. I come in and can feel that like some energy is cleared. And basically I guess the way that I would describe that I know that is like, I don't feel the need to like keep raging and keep crying. I don't necessarily feel differently about it yet. Like I'm still like, that's the first time I've really made contact with all of those emotions. It's the first time I'd ever really articulated like some of what was under all of that, like the anger and the this and that. So like those things weren't different, but like they weren't still like bubbling in me. And like on that level, things have quieted down a little bit. So I go inside and make myself something to eat. I go put on one of my shows that makes me kind of happy, which is another kind of like soothing thing. And I know for me, when I hit the geyser, when I hit really deep stuff like this, like I need a minute before I come back and start processing. I think that for me, this is also a physiological thing. Like my body has freshly come into contact with an emotion that felt threatening on some level. Like me feeling so afraid meant my body felt threatened, right? And it's really like tender and open when energy has moved through like that, right? So like I need to give my body a minute to calm. I need to give my mind a second to process all of the new information that's come up for me, like vocalizing all of the things under this trigger. You know what I mean? And so like I know that it's okay to just like take a minute to settle. So my husband comes down from therapy and we're watching our show and I tell him a little bit about it, which does kind of make me a little bit emotional, like as I start to talk about it again, but not quite as like over the top as I might have been before. And I'm like, yeah, I just like need to figure this out. And again, thankfully him and I have had enough conversations to where like he's not going to go and like feel more anxious about my situation and add more onto the plate for me. He just knows, okay, like I know you're going to figure it out and, let me know if you need anything from me. And again, I knew I was going to be able to go talk to my coach more about it because I'd sent that message kind of at the end of the day. So like I knew I was going to be able to get support because I've built that kind of support into my life. And I was like, okay, like we're going to figure this out. Tomorrow will be a new day. Okay. I woke up the next day, definitely felt more regulated, but still didn't necessarily have the answers about like how I wanted to move forward or like, yeah, basically how I wanted to move forward. And that was okay. That was okay. I still went about my business. I had stuff I had to do for work and I still went about all of those things and that was okay. But like in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, like I got to take what I've learned from yesterday from all of these parts of myself that had something to say and start like piecing them together with my intuition now, right? Because those were really afraid parts of myself. I don't like making decisions based on like very heightened emotions and on fear parts. That doesn't mean that I will repress them or not take into consideration what they're bringing me. Like they will contribute to how I move forward for sure. But personally, I do not like making decisions from that really heightened like emotions and from that triggered state. So since I was coming like so fresh off of that, I knew that I was not quite ready to like make decisions about how I wanted to move forward. I was starting to like mentally process some aspects of it. I was able to like, reflect on some parts of it and start to think a little bit more rationally, right? Like I was taking into consideration, some of the things that I was angry about the day before. And I'm like, okay, am I really angry about that? Yeah, okay, I really am. But like, what parts of it am I maybe not so angry about? Do I feel like a little bit differently about now that I'm not in the heat of the moment? Okay, I feel a little bit differently about this, but this part still really stands. And I really need to address this. I can still feel that this thing that pissed me off still needs to get acknowledged in some way. But this other thing, I don't feel quite strong about, right? Like I was starting to start to sift through it a little bit. And what's funny enough is I was not able to talk to my coach that day, which I think is, for me, I felt like was its own kind of divine intervention because it gave me a full day to get more regulated because I wasn't fully back at my baseline and center by that point. Because again, this was a really deep one, right? But I was moving towards there and I was starting to try and like talk about it with myself. Okay, this was out loud. This was in my journal and like starting to get back to my center. I was making my way back, got to kind of a different place. And I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of considering these things now that all of this has come up, but I kind of can't imagine, making this kind of change. So I feel like I'm probably not going to do that. Like I was starting to put it together. Enter the third day, woke up the next day, definitely felt better than I had the 2 days and felt like I was getting much more back to my center. I find when I come back to my center and with my spirit, I'm able to see the good in things and I'm able to feel grateful about aspects of what have happened and me seeing through that lens of me being really fearful. Like I don't feel that as much when I've regulated and kind of returned to my center after having a moment where I'm really triggered. Okay. So on this third day after this big trigger, because yes, we're 3 days, well, technically like 48 hours probably post, really deep trigger coming up. And on this day, I'm like, okay, like it is not all bad. Like it's really okay. Like there's some parts of this that have been really hard, but like, honestly, this is okay. And that's when I actually started to get more spirit winks and more messages from my guides is when my energy started to become more open after I'd come back to my own center. Cause I'd been asking for signs the days before, not really got any, but honestly, because I was still so dysregulated and so angry and upset, which was so important for me to feel. But like, that's not the state where we really see and connect with some of that higher dimensional like energy for signs. Like, that's not when we're the most open to it. So it makes perfect sense to me that I didn't see a bunch of those the days before until I felt like I was like really back in it. Right. So I started to get some signs and I started to feel some messages and things that really resonated with me and basically helped how I was looking at this whole situation. Okay. I'm like, oh, you know what? Yep. This is a perspective shift that's actually really helpful to me. Or wow, like this is a really good thing that has come out of this. Or like, wow, that thing I was really upset about, like, I really don't feel like I need to be that upset about it, you know? And again, these are all coming from a place where I authentically and truly felt it. It was not me trying to force myself to feel that way. By this third day, I like felt again, more open-hearted to some of these other ways of looking at it and considering how I wanted to move forward. I'm not a spiritual bypass girly. So I was not trying to tell myself, but look at the positive in this in the days when I was really upset, because I knew that those upset feelings obviously needed to have their moment like they did. And I trusted myself that I was going to come back to like the truth of what I wanted once I gave it some time. I knew that that trigger was not going to last forever. So I didn't feel the need to rush it. I didn't feel the need to like make it smaller or make it go away, because it was okay. If it took a couple days for that energy and those emotions and that trigger to move through, that was okay, because I got tools, I got support. Like, I know I'm going to be safe. And I know once a little time passes, like, I trust myself to find the right answer for myself. Do you know what I mean? And sure enough, I did. And then that's when I started talking with my coach. And I had so many wonderful things happen in that conversation with her. Like, it felt like it was absolutely like meant to be that this trigger came up when I was working with her, because even in what we talked about and things that she shared and validated, like, it healed some really important things in me. Like, it deeply, deeply healed things that I don't know how I would have had the opportunity to like heal and recondition them in other circumstances. Like, it's hard for me to imagine how that trigger would have had a better opportunity to be healed, to be honest, if not in this circumstance. And I can look back on that now, and I was kind of seeing that in the moment. And then I had like an actual session with her the next day too, which of course was like very karmic. I believe, like I've talked about in other episodes, as soon as there's a problem, there's also solutions that present themselves at the right time. So the fact that this trigger came up and gave me enough time to kind of ride my own wave, and as I'm like coming down on the bottom of the wave and I'm ready to start making sense of all of it, I already had those sessions booked with people to support me. Like, all of that, I feel like is the beauty of what can happen when you just kind of trust the process, and when you design your life in such a way to allow for your humanness, which is allowing for your triggers. Do you know what I mean? So basically, in my session, like my live session with my coach, I was able to ask her opinion on some of the things that I felt like I really needed to iron out. Like, there were some really deep, I guess you could say, sort of questions that came up from the part of me that was really angry, and from the part of me that was thought that some of it was BS. Like, I needed to get answers to those questions that felt more true for me, because what I was telling myself or how I was thinking about those things obviously wasn't working for me if I was feeling really pissed off about what was going on, you know? That was at least how I was making sense of it all, you know? So me having a place where I could acknowledge the parts that felt like they obviously weren't working and have somebody help me move through them. And to be honest, like, some of the first answers that she gave me, I was like, nope, I don't feel like that answers it for me. So can you give it to me another way? Because even though the first answer of what she told me did not feel like it resonated, I was still open to hearing something that would help make me feel differently about it. I was not so committed to thinking sort of like negatively about the situation. I knew that those sort of, I guess you could say, negative feelings came up with a purpose. Like, there was something in there that was telling me that like what I was telling myself was not resonating. It wasn't feeling true to me, but I didn't need that to be the like end of the story, the end of the road, right? The first thing she said when I was kind of like asking for input, I was like, that doesn't really feel like it like does it for me, you know? So can like you maybe talk about this another way? Like, what do you think about this one part? And when I did that, even though in the moment I was a little bit afraid because I was kind of like pushing back on what she said a little bit, but like she did not take that personally at all. And what she said next, like, gave me the thing that I needed to completely, one, call out myself, because there was some funky stuff that I was doing that wasn't totally aligned, and like gave me the perspective shift that I needed, that felt like it made that part of me that was angry angry, just sigh and relief and go relaxed and like be like, okay, yep, that's it. Like, I believe that. That's a better way to think about it. That's more true for me. I can buy that. You know what I mean? And like me finding something that felt more true in terms of how I was thinking and approaching that situation that triggered me, boom, like so healing. Sorry, I know some of this is a little abstract and a little bit cryptic. I'm doing my best to like explain my process without all of the little details because that's just what feels like the right way to talk about this particular example. And plus, I don't really feel like the details exactly matter for my personal situation. But if I was going to give you an example, just so it makes this like a little bit less general. So let's just say maybe you get triggered by your partner and something they are or are not doing, right? And you feel deeply upset about that. That is so common to get really triggered by our partners because our partners end up being a reflection of our caregivers and some of our deepest wounds are with our caregivers. So really when we get really upset, it's a story about something more than just the current circumstance, but the current circumstance is a way for us to work through it and start to see it differently. Okay. So let's just say, your partner isn't doing something that you want them to do and you feel really upset about it, right? And you take a couple days to let yourself have your feelings and you're not being nasty to them, but you are saying like, I have so many feelings about this. Like, I just need a minute. I can tell this is about more than just this moment. I promise I'm going to come to you and we're going to make this right, but like, I just need a minute. You take that time. And one of the things that you realize is that you maybe had an expectation that your partner just know what to do or that they would just know how you feel and that they would respond because you take so much time to notice the details or you take so much initiative to do things that are nice for them, even when they don't have to ask you. And you do that. So you think that it's reasonable that they would understand and just know and just do something. Okay. Maybe that's how you previously were thinking about it before. And after you sort of rode the wave of this trigger and come back into a place where you're a little bit more grounded and you're kind of observing all the parts that went into the trigger, you can see that maybe that expectation that your partner mind read and do things without being requested or without there being a conversation about expectations before that, maybe that's not the most fair thing. And maybe there's still a part of you that, has a message behind that. Maybe the message you uncover there is that, you do need a little bit more support than you're currently getting, or, that there's a part of you that really wants to feel considered. And maybe you need to do some inner work to be more considerate of your own feelings and of your own inner child, because a lot of that stuff needs to happen with us first before it can come from a partner. Our partner is only ever going to like barely start to scratch the surface on some of those really deep emotional wounds. But anyway, let's just say you also uncover that there's a part of yourself that's not feeling super considered, but you still know that this expectation that they mind read and just do things without ever actually being asked, that's not totally fair. That is an example of some of the things that can be revealed once a trigger comes up and once you're able to kind of work with, okay, what was really going on here, right? Okay, I can acknowledge this is what I was mad about. I don't think that's a thing. Like, how can I look at this a little bit differently to where I can still get the need met that I was able to see in this circumstance? Let's just say that I need a little bit more support and, there's an inner child in me that wants to be a little bit more considerate. Okay, how can I go about getting those needs met and have beliefs and expectations about the situation that are a little bit more fair, right? And then maybe that's okay. I'm not going to expect him to, and I say him, I know that's kind of like a heteronormative thing, but, let's just say I'm not going to assume that my partner can automatically understand my needs and is automatically going to know what to do. I'm going to let that go. But instead, I'm going to start being vulnerable and asking for more support and starting to take more time to identify my needs, considering myself, figuring out which one of those that I can meet. And again, being a little bit vulnerable and sharing with my partner if I need a little support in those getting met. And instead of expecting him to read my mind, I'm going to expect them to come through on, times when they say that they're going to help me meet those needs or they're going to help give me more support. That's what I'm going to expect instead of the mind reading, right? So that's an example of how things can kind of like be changed and adjusted and updated after really deep information around triggers have been revealed. So for my example, I felt so much better after I spoke with my coach about it. I had quite a few crazy synchronicities of other things that happened that really helped me understand what all of that was about. Like, just like crazy things. And so I felt like all around me, after I became open to it, okay, what is all of this about? What is this helping me for? How is this helping me get to what I want? How is this helping me get to my dreams? After I became open to that, I got so many answers. I got so many really cool stories that helped show me that fear that I needed to excavate in my own psyche. Like, there was a thing I was being so stubborn about in my mind about the meaning that I was giving to a certain situation and how like much I was trying to avoid it and how much I was afraid of it. And in hindsight, I was like, oh my God, I was being so silly about that. Like, that did not need to be as dramatic as it was. But I don't know that I would have ever been able to have a perspective flip if I had not had that moment to face it, to have all of the deep, dark fears and feelings and all that kind of stuff come up about it, to let it rest and then be able to like observe it objectively and with my intuition and with the perspective of my, higher self and my soul self and all that kind of stuff. If I would have been able to see, oh, I didn't really need to be afraid of that, like at all. I did need to address some of these other areas, but like I didn't need to be afraid of that situation. And gosh, like all of this situation probably would have been a lot easier if I'd not been so like intent on being freaked out about it because I was giving this other situation meaning. So like it became something that I felt so grateful for. Probably, what would that have been? 1, 2, 3, probably like 3 or 4 days after the big geyser came up. And I will say that like I'm still working through parts of it. I'm still like implementing sort of my plan and my action plan from like what I learned I need and how I learned I can approach the situation differently. But my energy feels like I've just like dropped 100-pound weight. I swear to God, like it feels so much better. Even though I'm kind of going into newer territory, like I feel so much more clear-headed and I just feel lighter about the whole thing. I feel like it was an opportunity for me to deepen into more self-trust, that like even when the really big emotions come up, it's safe to let myself feel those and know that I'm going to return back to like who I really am, and the decisions that I'm going to make for my life are ones that are aligned with my values and my integrity. And I trust myself not to make like impulsive or nasty or not nice decisions from a place of being triggered. So it's safe for me to feel them, and it's safe for me to just not know what's going to happen on the end of a trigger, because every single time I've come back to my tools and I've come back to the love in my heart and I find my way again. So that's my story. This was a kind of a random idea for an episode, so I hope that it wasn't too confusing and that it's helpful for people out there. I guess if there are like any particular takeaways, or like if I was going to highlight some elements of moving through that trigger that might be helpful for you, is one, like don't identify too much with the feelings at first. Like yes, create space so they can move through you, but like don't overly identify with them. Because like there was a point when I was really triggered that I thought that I was going to make drastic changes to my life or something, right? And in the moment, I was like, okay, I might. So this is fine, but like, we're not doing it yet. But I'm like, okay, I might. All right. That would be fine. If we did, it would be okay. Right. But like, I wasn't identifying with that is who I am, or that is what it has to be. It was like, it was open because I wasn't trying to repress it, but like, we weren't going there yet. I was still in like observer mode for the most part, feeling mode, but also like, there's a part of me that was like, okay, we're going to wait before any big things happen. Giving your body some time to settle, creating that support and safety with your loved ones. Again, I think that can look like, just articulating to your partner or the people around you, like, I'm moving through something that's feeling really emotional. I know I'm going to be fine, but like, I'm just taking a minute to process it. So if I feel a little bit more quiet, if like I'm a little bit more emotional about things for a minute, that's why. But like, I promise I'm going to be good. And if I need something from you, I'll get it. And with your kids, maybe it's like, yeah, like, mom or dad's feeling a little bit weird right now, but I'm going to feel better in a couple days. And then just keep going about it. Like, it's okay. Like your whole life doesn't have to stop. If you're going through a big trigger, like you can still kind of go through the motions that might even be a little bit regulating to your body to kind of like return to routine. But like, you still don't have to fake it and like be your, like this happy, bubbly self. Like if you need to take a minute to just kind of like move through it, let yourself do that. And then like find your way back to your heart, find your way back to your spirit, and like look at the situation through your soul eyes, through your higher self's eyes. Right. And I feel like that's a skill, like learning how to do that more and more, which I suppose I can do another episode on sometimes. But like, and even I'll do it in meditation, like meet my higher self and ask them, like, how do you look at the situation? How do you see this information? What's a different way that I can look at it? Once I get regulated, I'm really, really open-minded to what else I can learn about the situation, in addition to the feelings and like the needs that they revealed to me. Right? Because I know that I want to move forward in a way that, again, is in integrity with like who I feel like I really am and what's important to me, that does honor parts of myself that feel a certain kind of way, the triggers, but ultimately is led by my hope, is ultimately led by love, is ultimately led by my dreams, right? And so finding a way to balance both of those and how I move forward. It's kind of that like last piece, like when, kind of once the wave is crested. And then of course, nervous system regulation, help your body come back into safety, know that you're truly safe, because you can't really look at things different cognitively until your body is out of danger mode. And I'm going to teach more about that in that course, that digital course, which is probably going to be pretty cheap, by the way, because I just want it to be something that a foundational thing and like finding more expansiveness and joy and love in your life that many people can access. If you want to learn more about that, I'll have details about it in the show notes, I'm sure. But let me know your messages if this resonated, if it made you feel a little bit less crazy for times where you've been really triggered and like maybe in the moment you've been really emotional, and if you needed a moment just to be in the emotions and then later start to be like, okay, well, what's really going on? Like I can observe I felt this way, but I can tell that that's a fear part of me, and like you can start to put it together or whatever. Like if that kind of process resonates, or if maybe that inspires you to be able to move through triggers in any way. Because really, this podcast is all just about like offering something that is going to be helpful to you. So with that, I hope that you have a wonderful week. Again, send me a DM or something if you have any fun thoughts or takeaways from the episode, and I will see you next week for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode and for tuning in to Breakthroughs with Bree. Please share your favorite episodes with your friends and loved ones, and please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, as it helps me continue to create these episodes to help support your breakthroughs. I would love to stay connected with you, so please follow me on social media at Healing with Bree. Please check out my website at healingwithbree.net, which will always have the most up-to-date information about the services that I'm currently offering. And please consider using the link in the show descriptions to subscribe to my email list so you can be the first to hear about any offerings. You can get all of the free resources that I offer, as well as get my weekly channeled messages. My deepest love and gratitude to you, and I can't wait to have more breakthroughs with you next week.